All right, we are ready to begin week 3, which is Colorwork Victory. So let's look at this pattern a little bit before we begin. You're going to be using all 4 of your colors. And you'll note in the pattern that it says to move to your larger needle. This color work will pull in as well. So if you remember our beginning pattern, this pulled in a bit, and it wouldn't possibly hurt to give that a look and say, if it pulled in more than you like, you might want to jump up even an extra needle size. So what do I mean by that? When you get ready to do your main color here, which is represented by the white, for example, I'm a loose knitter, so I did the lace in a 2. I'm going to put my 3s on, and we'll knit these first 5 rounds in my color D with my number 3. And I'm going to consider then jumping up to a 4. This is not written in the pattern anywhere. This is just kind of an observation as we've been working with folks on their HusKAL that are tight in this area. Even if you're a loose knitter, I'm a loose knitter, and I often will go up in the color work. So that might be an option. I would not change it until I get to the color work section. Okay, the other decision that we'll be making is, do I carry my yarn up? So you'll see that we have here color B, and then B is used again a ways down the road. And so at this point, I most likely would not carry that color, especially if you're working with the white. Every once in a while, you will notice that may show underneath. So it's this color, which is B, and then the next color, which is C. You'll have to make a decision because C is then used again. So you have to make a decision on if you want to carry that. Now, the distance to carry that is not nearly as far. It all can be carried up. Obviously, you will carry up D all the way. So, because you're using it, in each row. So that's obvious. But again, I'm going to change my needles, and I'm going to go up one more so that I don't have maybe as much pull that's happening. Lots of times people will say, well, it'll block out. It will block. Blocking does wonders for a project. But if it's way scrunched in, you can only block it so much because of those strands that are floating behind there. Next, we're going to review how we do the color work again and talk a little bit about whether we should trap floats or not. Okay, I've got the color work started. I want to show you a couple things. I simply on this one decided to tie. So you can kind of just see that I tied it to my working yarn. This is my tail. I just tied it to my working yarn. I will trim that. I don't want that much hanging in my project. You'll notice on the back how your yarn floats along. And don't forget when you're doing your color work to stretch that out so that they don't get too tight. We want to talk a little bit about whether it's good to catch these floats. Traditionally in color work, if it's more than 5 stitches, you could do an extra catch. It's very similar to what we do when we weave in our yarn in the trapping of it. You can find tutorials on that online. I'm not a believer in catching floats, especially in a project like this. Catching floats will make a really dense product. It may show through as well. When it is valuable is when you would put your hands in it like a mitten, and you wouldn't want to catch these floats. So in this instance, I do not catch floats. I very rarely catch them. This is inside a tube. It's not really going to be an issue. we turn the project around, I noticed that when I was coming around, somehow I was off by 1 stitch. And it might have been down here in this yarn over situation. So I simply just did a make one. And I noticed that I was off after I'd done my color work, of course, because I didn't have the right number of stitches. And I did a make one right in here, and you can barely see it, and you for sure won't be able to see it when I'm wearing it. And when I do just an extra stitch like that, I will do a make one by making one right. I find that that really hides the stitch well and leaves the smallest kind of gap. I want to demonstrate again to you how to do color work Continental style, that is shuttling both of the yarns in your left hand. One of the things we talk about in color work is the dominant color. And so we would tend to think that the dominant, which would be most in my head, might be this sandstone kind of color. But the dominant color in color work is the one that you want to pop. And so in this instance, it's the dark green. And the dominant color needs to be carried closest so it travels the shortest amount of space on the back. So when I'm tensioning these yarns, When I'm tensioning these yarns, I will take it, I like to work with it on my table or desk like this, and I will go several times with my hand, and I will make sure that the dominant yarn is closest here, or I call it closest to my heart, closest to the project. And then when you Continental knit, you wrap your yarns around your pinky finger this way. And then to shuttle it, you give your index finger through the middle and you put both of the yarns up and over. If you didn't put your middle finger through, you would notice that that they overlap and that there's just not enough space between them. So you take and you get them wrapped around your pinky finger, put your middle finger through both, and I really get them positioned on there so that they'll shuttle through like that. And then I'm going to come and I'm ready for the green. So we'll pick up the green. We'll get a little closer here. Pick up the green, and then we come over and we do the cream. And you'll notice that sometimes it gets close together again, and you can kind of stretch it out and get them back in position, and then you'll knit with your dominant or your color dominant, and then you want to give that just a little bit of a tug out. So I'm ready to go again. I'm going to take the camera back so that you can watch me as I do this. So you can see that I go over and pick up that yarn. And then we're ready for the green again. And you'll have to tension your yarn several times. That's not uncommon to tension that yarn. Let's talk about making the turn. So we do 2 cream. And then I think as a magic loop person, if you're knitting magic loop, then you have that tendency, and we do want it to be tight. But when we're doing color work, we've got to be especially mindful that we're not really pulling this area tight, because that's where we get that pucker in. By the way, I did change my needle size. I went up an additional 1. And even from what's written on the pattern. So I'm using a 4, I'm using a 3 as my standard needle, and for this section, I will be using the 4, which I am. And what I did do with that is I changed it the row before, so that then when I started my color work, I wasn't fighting small stitches on a larger needle. Okay, Colorwork Victory. It is. I completed this section, and you'll note that I did go up the needle size, and it looks really good. I know that this will block out really well. I'm pleased that I did that. I also went back down then to my standard needle that I use, which is a 3. So I used a 4 here as a loose knitter, and then I went back down to a 3 so that this wouldn't flare out, because the next section has a large portion of stockinette in it as well. Let's pull back and look at it as a finished piece. You can see here how much this one has pulled in a bit. It will block, but there'll be a bit of a tug still with that one, where this, I really feel, is going to, I think I'll be more pleased with this one than my first one that I knit. I have dealt with all of the ends. Everything's woven in all the way up. And when I'm done, I want to be done. I don't want to have to, weave in ends. I want to just be able to Kitchener and put it on, because it will be cool and perfect for wearing when we are done. Next week, this is what we'll be doing. It's a mosaic piece. So it looks like color work, but it's actually slip stitches, and we'll be using 2 colors. Honestly, once you get through these first 4 patterns, we're on to week 4 next week. You've done a lot of kind of the heavy lifting. So you can look forward to only working with 2 colors, I believe, 1 color or 2 colors from this point forward. So congratulations on your victory with your victory stripes. You can see that Millie doesn't have much to say today. She's taking a snooze in her bed. She's never far away, but she was good with color work this week.